In this episode of BTS with the CMO, we are hanging out with Arun Iyer, co-founder of Spring Marketing Capital, a venture fund that specializes in building brands. Arun has spent nearly 20 years in advertising, where he served as a chief creative officer and chairman. He is the creative force behind iconic campaigns like Surf Excel Daag, achhe, hain and Fastrack, Move On. I'm Devika Chitnis from Rocketium. Let's get started.
You've been the man behind a lot of iconic brands, etc., right? And you have so many taglines, and I know you're inherently creative, you're inherently right-brained, etc. So from a very colorful world, and I know you've heard this a lot, how have you made your way through the most boring spreadsheets, CAC and ARR? How do you justify that journey?
So I don't think it's an either or. So I think I've been fortunate enough to have played a long creative innings and continue to play at that. But I think I've always been fascinated with the business of things. It's never been, because I think there's a reason why marketing advertising is known as commercial creativity.
Right.
So it's not creativity. It's not like I'm painting something and it's a form of expression, and then whoever understands that expression enjoys it.
Right.
It's for a purpose. It's to serve a business. It's to serve a commercial reason. So I think I've always been very cognizant of the fact that it's my creative abilities which kind of accentuate what it does to certain businesses. So I've never been disconnected from that reality. So from that lens, moving from a pure play creative director role, but to be honest, that I had transitioned even in my previous role because I was running the company for India. So I was pretty much involved in the running of the operation. But yeah, it's quite a significant shift to move into the venture capital world, to view things from an investor perspective while still keep the creative angle on. Actually, it's been the steepest learning curve I've had in a very, very long time. I've now been in this business for almost 25 years, and the last 6 of those have been super learning. It's been a very steep learning curve. So I've actually enjoyed it a lot, and I really think that we also bucket creativity into this thing of saying, oh, you're doing something mysterious, you're doing something ethereal, and I don't think it's like that. I think creativity is possible in many spheres, so that's how I view it.
Right. And when I look at your work experience, one of the things that stood out to me is your clarity to be a creative person. It was like somebody from KC College came in and he decided he wanted to be a copywriter, made his way to becoming a creative director, and now is kind of also helping other startups become that. How does that clarity come in?
I wish I knew. I think I call it I think it was the brashness of youth back in the day. I think, but there was something inside me which kept nudging me in this direction, and this is way back when I was a salesman. I was selling automatic rescue devices at Otis Elevators, and there was a sale that had happened, and and there was a possibility of actually covering up for the cost of that sale through a marketing intervention, and that's a recommendation I had made. And I realized that my bent of mind happens to be in that direction. And I used to write for some magazines. I used to really enjoy the process of thinking in ways that can engage people.
Right.
And slowly I honed on it. But it's just, I think I was just blessed to be nudged in that direction at frequent intervals. And I did land where I did. I also must admit, I had a few very close friends who were in this space, and whom I used to see closely and watch closely, and I got quite inspired by them, and that kind of prodded me further. But yeah, I'm Destiny's child in this space.
Could you talk to us about your first campaign? How was it? How did it happen for you?
This was back in the day. This is late 90s, just getting into 2000s. At which point in time, the medium of choice, a lot of it was actually print. And there was this, in fact, coincidentally, there was an agency, there is an agency called Multi-Print Advertising where I started my career. Where I started my advertising career. And that agency had a client called CCIT. In those days, there were a lot of these software institutes which used to advertise for students to join. And I had written a small little 10cc print ad which my mother still has a cutout of. I remember writing that headline which said, "Get paid to teach others a lesson." And I felt like I had reached the pinnacle of creativity, and and now when I look at it, I'm like, really, what was I thinking? But it was my first ever print release, a 10cc ad. It released in Nagpur, in a newspaper in Nagpur.
Okay.
So
Hitwad. Was it Hitwad?
I don't remember the name of the paper, but it released there, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then what happened next?
That led that I did that for maybe a year and a half or so. Joined another advertising agency called By Design. Did some work there. Short stint again till I moved on to an agency called TBW, and then ended up joining CNBC. It was a very lateral move in those days because CNBC was just setting up, and they were forming an in-house division called Cell 18, which would create advertising for its shows, and I was part of the founding team of Cell 18.
Okay.
CNBC itself was forming.
Yeah.
So I think that's where my journey, my first brushes with a startup happened.
Right.
Because it was an Indian joint venture between TV18 and NBC in New York. And the joint venture was coming into the fore, and I was fortunate to work with some very, very bright people like Harish and Sai and these guys. And that then led for me to actually, I got a bit saturated with that job because I think it was too early in my journey. I had not done enough to be focused on just business news as a sector, which led me to join Lintas.
Okay.
And then I spent 16 years before I started Spring.
Okay. So from an outsider's perspective, when you're not part of advertising, etc., you think that an advertising office looks like Mad Men, right? You're pouring your glass, you're talking about, you're wearing suits, or it's in complete opposite. There's a beer fridge and then you're in shorts. What does it really look like?
So it's been different at different points in time. So there were days when I have seen people drinking in the office. I have smoked in the office, and it was a smoking office. We could smoke wherever we wanted to, till it became smoking cabins, and then it became smoking corridors, and then it became smoking outside the building. So it kept getting pushed away. But I have seen many phases of it because of the sheer number of years that I've done. But what is never spoken about, while there is a casualness, while there is fun, while there is a lot of, there used to be, I don't think it exists anymore. While all of that is there, I think the one thing that the amount of effort and the amount of toil that goes into creating brands, the amount of investment that takes for you to get invested in behind a brand and feel for it and then build it. I think that is something that is not spoken about. And I think part of the reason why the business is where it is today is because I think it was made to seem like it all happens too casually.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason why people felt, hey, this happens very casually. It doesn't need, but that's not the case.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if we get into the workings of what happens, once the client gives you a brief, then what happens?
I think a lot of it depends on what it is that you're trying to solve. Because again, I think there are different points in time in the business. So Usually what happens is that when you have been working with a brand for a long period of time, you have a fair sense of where the brand is, where the business is at, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the challenges that brand can solve. Because there are marketing challenges and then there are business challenges, both of which are slightly different, because the marketing challenges are saying, okay, how do we get more cut through? How do we make sure that our marketing initiatives stand out by themselves? And then there are business challenges like saying there are certain geographies that are not working for the brand, or certain geographies are doing better than others. How do you solve for that through brand? So there are different challenges. So once a brief comes in, depending on what the challenge is, you kind of use a lot of your understanding of the existence of that brand and then apply that filter and then say, okay, now given the challenge on hand, what is the most creative, engaging fashion in which this problem can be solved? So you try and attack it from that point of view. But then again, it's also gotten a little transactional now, because I think the relationships have also become where there are long-term relationships are not as frequent now. Yeah.
Right. But when it comes to, say, building a creative brief, right? You have a team, you kind of brainstorm on ideas. How does that framework look like?
So I think a large part of the time goes in actually distilling and arriving at what it is that you're trying to solve for. Because I think problem identification, most of the time goes in very articulately identifying what is the problem you're trying to solve. And then once that clarity spreads amongst the team, because then the possibilities and the ideation is very rich, because it's all in one direction.
Yeah.
If not, it is going all over the place. Then as a creative director, your job becomes how to rein in some of these thoughts, how to channelize them into one direction. So that, at least in my personal view, I spend a lot of my time making sure that whoever's working on something, they're very clear what it is that they're trying to solve, and then the how of it you can brainstorm, and then the how is the fun. Because that there are because everybody has a different perspective, everybody comes with different views on it. Then you play around with the how, and then you see what suits the brand best and suits the problem at hand best.
Arun, why don't we speak about one of your, there are many memorable campaigns. Why don't we start with Surf Excel Daag, achhe?
Yeah, that's it's my takiya kalam, like they call it. Like,
what does takiya kalam mean?
As in, like, I'm known by, most people, like, it's one thing which has gotten so deeply entrenched with my identity that I can't, very rarely can I get away without speaking about it. And I keep saying this. So I actually joined Lintas in 2003, and I actually tried to get in 2001, almost got in, and then there was a hiring freeze and I was without a job. And but I was very, very keen, and a large part of the reason was that at some point in time I wanted to work on this brand, because it was a brand that I have seen my mother look up to so much, because as we were growing up as children, it's a brand that she really looked up to for some reason. I don't know why, I didn't know enough about brands then. But it was a brand that was constantly in my scheme of things. And again, I think it was a little bit of serendipity that somewhere in my subconscious I had this, I kind of willed it. And then I joined Lintas, and then I started working on, I was working on the hair category in the beginning. And then I started working on this brand, on Surf Excel. And initially I did some pieces of work. There was some price drop, there was an aerial price war which was very popular in those days, and then led to some regional campaigns in the south, and then there was this looming global idea called Dirt is Good, which kind of was hovering around, and they were trying to take it to other markets. And there were some ex-colleagues of mine who, they were all trying to work on it, and there were a ton of experiments that were on, which somehow it wasn't landing, because I think the Western context of the idea, of the whole thought process of saying, hey, you know what, not enough children are going out there and getting dirty, and because of which they're not experiencing life, was very alien to this country. Because parents mothers and parents in general were saying, listen, we have in our context, getting dirty is associated with falling in. So it's not necessarily something that parents look forward to. So that challenge was inherent till I worked with whom I consider in my life as two of the most amazing marketeers that I have ever come across, which is Gopal, who's now the CEO of Airtel, and Sudhir, who's the MD of GCPL. Sudhir was a brand manager then. I was a copywriter. Balki was my boss. Preeti Nair was my boss. So, and we were working on this, and then we actually, Gopal's the guy who mentioned that, listen, you know what, if you've got to get through to Indian parents, you've got to pivot it towards values, and you've got to show them value in getting dirty, and only then will they be okay with this. And that led to us coming up with Daag, achhe hain. That led to me writing the first commercial, which was the brother and the sister in the puddle, which was shot in Ooty, because we were also so cognizant of the fact that where do we shoot it? How do we shoot it in a place where, so our criteria was very simple. We said we will shoot it in a place where if a chocolate falls on the ground, you'll pick it up and eat it.
Right.
You won't throw it. So it's hygienic enough. So, and we felt Ooty was that place. And we ended up shooting it there, and then the rest is history. And then it's what we are now in 2024. That was 2005.
Right.
It's 20 years in. The idea still exists. The brand is doing very well. Recently, I got invited to the brand crossing $1 billion in revenue.
Wow.
Just in India.
Wow.
So the brand is now $1 billion brand, just in revenue. So it's one of those things.
That's a very beautiful.
Fortunate to have been a part of it. Yeah.
And I think the next campaign that comes naturally is the idea, what an idea searchy, right?
Yeah.
So how did that idea come in?
So that idea was not something I came up with or was part of when it was thought of. I actually inherited that idea because I came onto the brand a little after the idea was already done.
Got it.
So I was involved with the brand. So a very close friend of mine, Nikhil Rao, who's now a filmmaker, him, Balki, who was my boss then, that was the team that actually came up with the thought.
Right.
At that point in time, I wasn't involved with the brand. But then when I took over the creative reins of the agency in 2010, and back then, I kind of inherited the idea, and then I was involved with the campaigns going forward.
Got it.
But it's been a very powerful journey for the brand, because I think what it did was that it kind of, because at that point in time there was a brand in Vodafone, Hutch Vodafone, which was speaking to the urban audiences.
Correct.
And then there was idea which was speaking to a large mass of India.
Right.
But what was nice about the thought was that the large mass connected, and when you said what an idea, the transformative power of the mobile phone.
Yeah.
And I think the some of it actually came alive a couple of years after the campaigns actually went live. So I think the transformative power of the mobile phones is what resonated.
And what about, I remember being 13 or 14, and every time Fastrack Move On would come, I had to change the channel because somebody was looking in. So, and that had a very different India that we had looked at, right? Like Dil Chahta Hai was coming in, there was a lot of other things that was happening. How did you have the pulse of what's happening, and how did you think of that campaign in the first place?
So, the Move On campaign, which again is something that's closely associated with me, is that entire get out of the closet. At that point in time, Article 377. At that point in time, it was a very hot debate. And Fastrack has at least till I was involved with the brand, it was always a brand that took a stance that was very bold in its avatar, and it never shied away from polarizing. It never shied away from polarizing. And at that point in time, we were doing a brand campaign, and we felt that the core of the brand was effortlessness.
Right.
And when this whole thing was, there was so much confusion and so much talk about this. Something in me said, what if we just did a very simple piece of just telling people, saying, if you have sexual preferences, get out of the closet and move on.
Right.
And let's move on with life.
Right.
And that was the campaign which kind of just took off.
Yeah.
We did a bunch of pieces. In fact, what nobody knows about that piece of work, not nobody knows, many don't, is that the track in that film is actually a Daft Punk track.
Okay.
So,
okay.
And
okay.
and that's one of the rare few pieces of music that Daft Punk has allowed to be used for commercial use.
Okay.
So Bharat Sikka shot it.
Right.
Very well-known photographer, filmmaker. And Bharat was very, very keen at that point in time, and we were all very keen that we use this track. And Daft Punk said no. We don't let our music out for commercial reasons. And then we wrote an entire case to them on how this is meaningful and how this can change society. And then they actually reduced their price and sold it to us.
That is fantastic. Yeah, that's a beautiful story right there.
That was the story of Fastrack.
What about some of the stories behind, last minute as a TV producer, there would be something or the other that would go wrong, that is just given. I'm assuming it's similar for you as well. When the campaign needs to go live, something goes wrong. What are some of the situations like that for you?
Oh, there are many. I'll give you one anecdotal reference. Around 2014, we had done this campaign for Tanishq, which was called The Second Marriage. We didn't know at that point in time it will become what it became. It actually stemmed from a very simple thought of the collection, and then there was a thought that Balki had back in the day, which we repurposed for this campaign. But we were running against time. The film had to go for release. We were recording every night for 4 nights. We just couldn't get it right because there was a track that the offline editor had used, which was a Rahman track from the film Rockstar.
Yeah.
And we couldn't manage to get a track which we were happy with as the one that we had used. And every night we would go into the recording studio, and every night at about 2 o'clock we'd take a call saying, oh, it's not working, let's come back tomorrow. We did this 3 or 4 days on the trot. Gauri was the filmmaker, she was shooting it, and we would do this. We did this 3-4 times till finally we just sat there and Balki was there, and we said, listen, there is no way out of this, we just have to buy that track. And we were running against time. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. We had to contact, because the way rights work is that Rahman doesn't allow anybody to touch any track that he's made.
Right.
You use it, you buy it, and use it exactly how it is made, or don't use it.
Okay.
That's Rahman's clause. So we had to contact his studio, we had to contact T-Series, we had to buy the track, and this is all 2 hours before it's going live. So yeah, that's how it plays out.
Wow, pretty cool. Now we'll just do a quick fireside chat. There'll be some questions, maybe the ones that put you in a corner.
You're the Karan Johar.
I just want you to engage with your prefrontal cortex and we will go for it, right?
Yeah.
So who was the client from hell?
There was this guy, I don't want to name the company, but he was from hell. So he used to sit with his back to with his back facing us, and we used to go show him work. He used to see the work and then chuck it. And we didn't know whether the chucking meant it was good, so take it and go back, or whether the chucking meant it's bad. So we had no clue.
Okay.
And then we had to wait for a cue from his assistant to know whether that was a good chuck or a bad chuck.
Okay.
And this was meeting after meeting. So yeah, he was a terrible client.
Okay. Okay, very interesting. Which is one of the campaigns you feel shouldn't have gone live?
Oh, there are many. There are many. No, there are mistakes you make, and I think it's. I tend to have short-term memory when it comes to those.
Okay. Which one do you think should have gone live and didn't?
Should have gone live and didn't. It's difficult to say because there are quite a few. I think what happens is that you also get attached to some campaigns in the here and now. But in hindsight, I genuinely believe that if it is good, it will happen in some form or the other. So it's okay. I don't regret.
And while you're surrounded by the cameramen that we have here, what would you prefer, manual photo shoot and an AI generated image?
I am not married to either school.
Okay.
So I am not a believer of, I think in my view, nostalgia is a beautiful trap.
Okay.
It kind of, it creates this nice, warm, little fuzzy scarf on a winter day kind of feeling, which I don't think it sometimes holds you from moving on as well. It has its benefits. I think it does add character at times. But I think there is also merit in embracing technology and saying, because I think there is this demarcation we have made. I am not a believer in that school of thought that everything analog is beautiful and full of character, and everything digital and with a lot of tech is cold and is very cold-hearted. I don't think that's the case. I've seen very moving things that technology has created. I have cried watching which is that Simba film, the Lion film.
Lion King.
The Lion King. I have cried watching Nemo, Lost in Sea, and these are completely created with technology. So I don't see why your heart and technology can't meet.
I spoke to a lot of the people who worked with you on campaigns, and one of the things that they said was the culture that you brought in. Everybody felt very empowered when they were talking to you. Is that something that, as a leader, maybe a non, maybe you can bribe me with something.
I've just been kind. I should buy them a drink.
No. They all say hello.
Yeah.
But I think what was so I spoke to people who worked with you at Spring. I also spoke to people who worked with you at Low. One of the things that came out is that whether it is understanding the business perspective or really empowering the team, you had a sense of empathy. And that was apparently very rare in creative. How was that a conscious choice when it was about building perspectives, building that team? How do you create that culture?
So to some extent, yes, because I have noticed that I'm able to do my best work when I feel secure, when I feel like it's a safe space, where I feel like I can express myself without the fear of judgment, without the fear of somebody stealing ideas. And I think that the more you do that, I think it has been very enriching for me because, and I don't say this for posturing, I genuinely believe that a lot of the people that I have worked with are actually more talented than me. And this I say it with absolute clarity and with absolute humility, because I think I have been fortunate that I didn't have any fear when I was surrounding myself with people who were better than me, and because I would learn and I would get better. And this is something I did. I try and practice to the best of my abilities. I'm human. At times I do get insecure and I feel like, oh my God, these people are so good. What's going on? Will I hit redundancy?
Right.
These are thoughts that do cross my mind. But in general, I just feel like if you create an environment where people feel safe, happy, free to express themselves, the magic that it creates, and I've seen it firsthand, the magic that it creates is phenomenal. A lot of the work that I get credit for, the only credit I think I deserve is that I created a space where people could create that magic.
Right. Thank you on that note.
Thank you.
We will wrap up. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for talking to us for a while.
Thank you, Devika. It's been a pleasure.